and we will begin. So let's go ahead and do the PowerPoint for today. Okay, and go to show and from beginning. Cool. So can everybody see the PowerPoint?
Yep.
All right, let us begin. So welcome to week 4 of 5. We're almost there. So I have 3 stages on our road ahead this week. Today, we're going to talk about project and assignment integration. Next week, we're just going to wrap things up, maybe talk about English a little bit. And the last stage is just the rest of your life. So congratulations. Okay, so let's move on. Reviewing assignments, you have one more, which is between this session and next session. So that is, as usual, read the training document for week 5 and bring at least one question. Complete one article lesson via video call with your student. I think Britt and Ruth are well on their way to doing that. Tom, we have to review the technology just to make sure we're there. Have you contacted your student yet, Tom?
I have. We've communicated, I think, 3 times by email, and I let her know that I had picked up the materials and that we're going to try and work out the logistics for. And I spoke to Tammy also yesterday down at the office about that.
Awesome. All right, so we're in good shape. Okay, so we'll do one video call lesson, which would be pretty simple. You can use an article from ngu.com, so everything's already laid out for you. And basically the final project, it's not so long, is try to make a rough sketch for what a full lesson plan would look like. You don't have to use the models that we've learned here. We learned one before. That was the progressive ladder one, where you introduce the content, you add some basics, and then you try and practice at the end. That's fine. We're going to do a pretty easy one today, which is kind of awesome. And you can do that, or you can do anything. So then, after graduation, you have one more assignment, which is set goals for yourself and your student and work together to reach them. Now, let's review the assignment that's due today. First things first, I asked you to think of an ESL activity which you can share for feedback and inspiration. Who would like to go first? How about Ruth?
Oh my gosh!
It's just the line. This goes down in the line.
Oh, sure. I prepared. Well, actually, I guess I have to share my screen with you. Well, no, I don't have to. I can just tell you about it.
Okay, go ahead.
My student her name is Masha, and I think she does a lot of what, I think when I work with her, I'll be working a lot also with her son, who's 9 years old. His name is Jima. Oh. She doesn't speak a lot of English, and he does a lot of the translation. So I started with just something that I thought might interest both of them, which was, it was a mixture of, like, everybody talks about the weather, so really I was just going to teach you the 4 seasons, and then some sports that take place during those 4 seasons.
I like it.
And so but what she's a cleaning lady, so I figured if she's interested, and I don't know how much language she knows, so I really have to find out how much she knows and what types of conversation she's interested in. We started talking about, like, whether she wanted it to know for work or for, with friends, or we haven't gotten that far. So it was really just about, I wrote out the 4 seasons, and then on separate slides, I showed a snapshot and a picture of each of the seasons. And then I would show with the word and then without the word. And then, so I did that. I just heard the echo. So
yeah, I might, Tom, if it's okay, I might mute you intermittently, because it seems that your microphone controls sometimes give feedback. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. So Is that a problem, Tom?
Feel free.
I'm going to mute you. Take no offense. When I call on you, I'll unmute you. Also, if you want to say something, you can chat or just like wave your hand. Sound good? All right. So, Ruth, how much more would you like to share about your interesting activity?
Oh, it's just, I mean, then it just goes on. Like, then after we do, because I was reading and it kept on saying it's important to repeat her. She's a very much a beginner, so there's a lot of repetition. So I guess I did it 3 or 4 times for each slide for each season. So it got pretty long after a while because I kept on showing her with the picture, without, just to prompt her what the season was. And then I introduced some of the major sports for each of the seasons. And then I did the same thing, and I connected it with a picture of the season. So, and then it ended it. So.
All right,
So you already did this with your student?
No, I think it's actually, now that I've been thinking about it, I think it might even be too advanced. I can show it to you if you want. It's just on a Word document. It's nothing fancy.
You know, let's take a look. So first, before I stop sharing, I wonder if you can just switch sharing, because I did give permission to everybody. So is it possible for you from where you are to screen share?
Mm-hmm.
So try it.
You see?
No. Anybody?
Mm-mm.
So it says new share. So if you can, beautiful. You got it.
Okay. Let me see.
Whoa. Ah.
It's just it's nothing fancy. I'm not a graphic designer. It's just the 4 seasons. And then I just take it like winter, and then I take her through all 4 of the seasons. And then I just bring back up winter again without, and then I'll say winter and then spring, the same thing. I include the word for the repetition, and then I just say what are some winter sports, and then I label some, like those little icons.
Yeah. That's great.
And then it's like, what do you like? Because I wanted to try and create, I noticed that when we were in Dave's class, he was trying to ask them what they liked and things like that. So I was trying to bring that in because, I mean, he's 9. I'm sure Gma, he probably should have put in skateboarding or something. He probably does that. So it's just that question. So it's the same thing. It just goes on and on.
That's awesome.
And then
Yeah, it's great.
Everyone has their own style.
Yeah.
So oh yeah, triple S's in those lacrosse. There's my one correction.
Oh, thank God. I should have checked it. Well.
Okay. So any feedback for Ruth?
I think that's great.
I think so too. I'm excited to see how it works with your students.
Yeah.
Very impressive.
Yeah.
Word document, and it's Google Images.
Britt, do you have anything you'd like to screen share?
Well, what I did was I went to this ngoo.com and I went to Daily News and picked out an article that I thought would be a good one. It's actually intermediate level, but she said she's advanced, but I thought it would be better to start at intermediate, and it was an interesting article. So
View is important even for advanced.
yeah. Oh, but I don't know if I can.
We'll forge ahead, see what we can do.
Yeah, I thought I had it on my screen, but I guess I don't see it here. All I see is Zoom. So if it's a website that I want to bring up while I'm in Zoom, can I do that?
You can. So
I should have brought it up before the meeting and left it on the screen.
It can shorten the process, but it's not so long. No, you don't have the web browser open with the website. You're going to have to open the web browser and then go to the website.
Yeah.
Okay, so just make sure you can see your web browser. Oh, no, I can't minimize Zoom when I'm recording. That could be a problem.
Wait
So-
a minute. I do have it up.
Oh, perfect.
But when I went to share, I didn't see it under share.
Try again. Share should have a list of all your windows.
Of all the windows, yeah. Under share screen, right?
Hmm.
And why don't I see it?
Look carefully.
Maybe you can share your desktop and then.
Yeah, if you want to do that, we can then find it that way. Try sharing the desktop.
I don't.
It's all part of training. There we go.
Oh.
Okay.
If I go here, this is what it was.
That's it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Is that how you do it? Oh.
Yes. Great job.
And I thought this would be a great, and of course they have questions and vocabulary and all those things are in there. So it's great, but you can talk about, technology, whether it's bad to replace people with robots or whether it's a good thing, right? If people see it as an advancement, that's
A whole nother
happening.
debate. Should be an
Yeah.
interesting English lesson.
Yeah, and I thought it would be good even for an advanced student to talk about something because it's more theoretical and it's not, a nuts and bolts thing. So
Could you scroll down just to see the big picture of the article?
yeah, here's the vocabulary, here's the article.
Keep going so we can see those questions.
And that's a cute picture, isn't it?
That's disturbing.
And then you could ask those questions and that would show reading comprehension.
Yes.
And the third one is a trick question because they didn't name them yet.
Hmm.
So, and then
Doomsday and apocalypse.
It's in the article, sure, it would be easy to name them Row and Bot, but we want to give them real names.
Awesome. So, Tom, I know you were out last week. Do you want to share something?
Yeah, I did kind of a last minute thing. I did a little research on some ESL activities and all that, and actually really kind of got hooked on this. I think it's actually called ESLactivities.com. About and they break it down into warm-ups and listen, read, speak, and write. And for a couple of them jumped out at me. I didn't prepare a nice Word document or any kind of Google images for you, but I did. And one of them was doing interview questions. And the other one, which, I'm not, apparently Ingrid, who's my student, is relatively advanced. So I discussed it slightly with Tammy briefly yesterday and about, at what level do, as Barbara just said, even though somebody may be advanced, maybe you start at an intermediate level. And the other activity that kind of caught my eye was doing brochures. And so I thought maybe that would be something, because it's to be able to break down and ask questions about, whatever. It could be a resort brochure or an island brochure or a hotel, just as rather as kind of an alternative just to doing either an article or something like that. Anyway.
Good idea. So that's reading a real brochure, not making a new one?
Yeah, correct. In other words, just maybe, putting it up on the screen and then, working through it and asking questions about, what, for instance, what does, can you tell me what it means by when they're saying about occupancy or whatever, different adjectives, different words. And I don't know, just a thought.
It's a good idea.
Mhm.
And I think it's going to tie into what we'll do today. But before we get to that, let's do the second part. Let's hear the questions from the reading. We'll go in the same order. So starting with Ruth.
My question on is, do you just break into these and break it down for them? Because I having met my student, I think this is very advanced for her. So I guess this is probably for, I think it is even for intermediate
Advanced.
students. But when you're talking about it, do you break it down and say this is simple present, simple past, or would it be like you're just running
That is a good question.
exercises and you're just telling them hang, 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 or is that what you're doing? Because I think I would blow her mind if I'm like, here's past, present, past participles. I just wanted
There's a communication element that you need to master when you're learning a language, which is using language that talks about language. I think it's a controversial topic in the language teaching community because they want to avoid it in a way. However, I think it's kind of an archaic model. And the reason they want to avoid it is because they used to do things in the old classroom model, which I don't think is that efficient. Honestly, I think that if you have independent study and real conversation, that was harder before. Now we have the internet, so we can have independence. You can learn anything. I don't even know if universities are necessary. Basically, physics is on Wikipedia. That's fine. But now we can talk to people from other countries. That is one of the essential elements of language study. And we can do independent study by buying resources, or there's things online. But for us, when we are talking with our students and you want to explain something, there's a reason why the words were invented, noun, verb, adjective, and there will be a point where you will have to explain, why is it this way? It's like, well, because that's the adverb and not the adjective. If it ends with ly, it's the adverb. Something like that. And there might be something confusing that would occur in an NGU article, for example. I want to remember the specific example. Forestry. Okay, so the word was forestry. It's a noun. It's basically the science of taking care of trees. And the way the example that the article gave used forestry as an adjective, which can be confusing. So when the students saw the example and tried to make their own example, they used it as an adjective, just like the example sentence. But I said, well, you can't use it that way because it's normally a noun. So this is a feature of English. We could talk about it next time. That's week 5. I'll explain it. So I could say this. So this is my globe, and this is an ordinary pedestal, basically, for the globe. However, if I were communicating to you in English, I would say the globe pedestal was only plastic. Now, there are other ways to say it. I could say the pedestal of the globe is plastic, but I could have said it, the globe pedestal is plastic. Globe, if you ask me, is that a noun or an adjective? I would say it's a noun. But in this sentence, I put it in front of pedestal to tell you what kind of pedestal it is. It's the globe pedestal. So that's what they did with forestry. They said forestry officials said so-and-so. And officials is the main noun in that sentence. And they put forestry in front of it to tell you what kind of officials they are. So in explaining to the student why you should normally use it as a noun, I had to tell them that's normally a noun and use the word noun. And I say it's not, here they're using it in the adjective place. So it helps with communication. I don't think you can avoid it. If you establish a principle to avoid it, I think you're being inflexible. So great question.
Wow.
Anything else, Ruth?
Oh, no, that's it.
Okay, and Britt.
It's
Barbara.
not. Yeah, I don't know what year our book was published. This the I Speak English book. I think it's pretty recent. But in going through it and reading it, there's a part where they have resources for teachers, and they talk about this website about.com, which is dead. there is no about.com anymore. I did not know this. I clicked on it and I went to .com and I thought it said DoorDash and I'm going, wait a minute. And I did it over and over. No. So there's no more about.com, but there's a thing called .com. And that has, it puts things in areas. So one is science and one is, you know, taking care of your home, and another one is, you know, so you have to go to the one that's for learning. It's called thoughtco.com. And then that they'll still have an archive of their other things about ESL and so on that they had in there in the past. So I discovered
Appreciate
that.
that. Very nice.
It's not a question, but it blew my mind that it wasn't there.
Yeah, I guess the world changes pretty fast.
Yeah.
So, any other questions?
I don't think so.
All right, so we'll have periods where we can ask questions again. Tom, do you have a question from the reading?
Well, one thing, that small section that they have on the editing, I was wondering, I mean, it seems to me that is a great way to learn, you know, the tenses. I mean, is there, like, are there resources? I mean, that just seems to me like it's rather, you know, are there resources you can do that, you know, get that would have like kind of a fill in the blank thing on, you know, correcting the tense? Because I mean, of all the, you know, kind of whatever the questions or assignments within the reading, that seemed to me like it was be a really good resource.
Yes, I agree. Interesting again. So I think we'll touch on how looking at things closely for incorrection is one of the best ways, most efficient ways to learn English. So we'll see that again today.
Okay.
So with that, are you ready to move on? Let's go. So today's topic is called project integration. So we'll talk about what exactly we mean when we use the word project, how to use these projects in tutoring or classroom instruction. So originally I used this in classrooms, but the principles apply to individual tutoring. So you could take it either way. We'll see how it works in the classroom or in the individual lesson. We call that the project cycle. And then we'll see how you can use that with writing, and that's where the correction comes in. And finally, we'll just do our questions and review. So today's topic is actually pretty straightforward. You'll see a lot of the slides are basically identical, but it's very powerful. So that's kind of great. So what is a project? What do you think? When you were in school, when I said, hey, class, we're going to have a project, what did that usually mean?
An assignment? I don't know.
Well, it usually meant building something, at least from primary school.
Yes.
Or something that's just a little bit more expansive than just a regular assignment. There's multiple parts, I guess.
Exactly. How long would it typically take you to finish them, in your experience?
Depends on the project, I guess.
Yeah.
Were you given like a few weeks?
Oh, yeah.
Well, we're not going to do that here. But so that's why I say, what is a project? No due dates. Maybe between lessons, like, oh, by next time, please do this. So let's take a look at our project. So for our purposes, we're just going to call a project a constructive activity of substantial length. Constructive means, like Tom said, you make something. Substantial length, so it's not something like a sentence, make a sentence, that's not really a project. So the features, you can use this inside and outside of the classroom or lesson. That's the interesting thing. You don't have to assign it between classes. You can use it at the beginning of the class, okay, everybody, Today I want you to get together and make a brochure about vacation destinations. And you have to work together in English to make the brochure. That's why Tom reminded me. This is something I actually did. So we made a brochure. It worked pretty well. But you can also do it between lessons so that when they come next time, they have it, they can work on it, and then the teacher's role can come into play. We'll see what that is. So in the case of inside the classroom or lesson, that means you assign it at the beginning. These projects are not meant to go beyond the allotted time. So basically you want this all to be finished in one session, either the classroom lesson or the tutoring lesson. Okay, the project should produce a tangible, presentable result. The reason is you want to have something that collects all the input. Writing something like this, basically you think about it and you construct something that's cohesive, and it allows you to look at it and correct it and integrate new language, which is one of the key features of this style. Okay, completing the project should take 15 to 25 minutes. This is primarily when you assign it at the beginning. The reason is if you have an hour-long session and you want to go through the full project cycle, it's 3 stages. So 60 minutes divided by 3 is 20 minutes. It's in the middle of this. You want each cycle to be about 20 minutes long. That way you can finish everything in 1 hour. So yeah, while longer projects may be assignable outside the classroom, something short like a 25-minute assignment might be more useful. Again, just because you have to consider the self-discipline, motivation, and priorities of your students. I know Ruth already had an experience today where her student, as she said, blew her off. These people have lives, so we don't know why. But again, so if you give someone something, it's like, oh, you have to finish, this is a long project, it'll take you over 3 weeks, 40 hours of work. And they wait until 2 hours before the class. Well, you know, there's not even 40 hours left. So it's probably not going to happen. But 25 minutes is something that's substantial. You can work with it.
How do you know how long it's going to take?
Oh, good question. So you do develop a sense of time, which is one of the great things about being a teacher is you're coordinating time a lot. You have to control time to make sure that you cover all the material and that the learning experience is used well. The students are receiving the instruction that they should receive. And to do that, you have to know your people and to facilitate progress in a lot of ways. So that probably takes practice. And I didn't think of that when I wrote that. So probably you have to think about how long it will be. However, you are the instructor, so usually you can control the time. Say, okay, everybody put your pencils down wherever you are, that's fine, let's review. Which again, is one of the disadvantages of the old classroom style. Because if people are growing at different rates, you can't measure them and say, oh, this student is better. This student might just actually be faster, while this student is a deeper thinker. I'm not saying this student isn't a deep thinker, but there's all kinds of things going on. You don't know why one student is so far finished and another did not. And then you take a record, like their grades, and that can affect their career prospects. Don't think it's an accurate measurement. That's my opinion. So anyway, something presentable. What's a good project? Let's brainstorm. So in school, how did you make your reports?
In like on paper? Is that what or you mean?
Yeah, probably you wrote
PowerPoint
something.
or something, or
PowerPoint, very nice.
Typed it up, yeah.
Well, in your daily life, what materials do you read in English?
The internet, stuff
nice.
on the computer.
instructions, I guess.
That's a good idea. I know Tom said the brochure also,
Mhm.
so things like that. Signs. Okay, so in daily life, what do you watch or hear in English?
The radio, the TV.
As little news as possible.
Yes. So there's all those things. What about at work? How do you use English at work?
Communicate with if you need something done or to get something done.
Yeah, with your coworkers or your boss or your employees. You have to communicate together.
How do you communicate?
Usually verbally, if you're there in person.
Email.
Emails.
Yeah,
Very popular.
email.
Report.
Yeah.
So yes, the reason I ask these questions is because all of those things could be a potential model for a task in your lesson. So, for example, we're going to write an email to your doctor. It's not at work. We could write an email to your team member at work, something like that. We're going to make a PowerPoint presentation, which might require that they have access to software during your lesson, but we do. So we could make a PowerPoint in the session if you're calling over Zoom. However, when I taught in the classrooms, we had supplies, so colored pencils, construction paper, and that's how we were able to make posters, for example. So yes, kind of like in school, we could make reports in that way. So going from the brainstorm, we remember from week 2 when we talked about the unit lesson model that if you have a goal in mind, some kind of objective, you can find your way there somehow. You can stack ladders up to the eventual goal. So even if you have a student who's very basic in English or a student who's intermediate and they want to be able to write a perfect email, you can get there. You just have to break it down into enough small steps. And when you do that, you can ask yourself, well, what vocabulary do they need to get to that goal? So you can incorporate vocabulary into your lessons or have a dedicated vocabulary lesson. You can have reading or watching or listening to any real examples. I've been recommending audiobooks to my students, but it's a little substantial. But if they have time, it's a full book in English that they can listen to. You can show the required grammar or constructions that you see in these real things, and you can always incorporate repetition. Just like Ruth showed us, if you practice things over and over again, eventually you won't forget it. It's maybe not reasonable to expect someone to remember everything between a learning session and the next one. But if you've seen the Karate Kid, they do like the wax on, wax off. If you program in the motion with English, if you program in the phrase and the intonation, eventually it is recalled. And it's a very mechanical way to learn language, but it cannot fail. Okay. Except in an efficiency sense, but that's a different story. So working back from goals is the place that you want to start. So a good project is a useful, tangible, practical result. That's the goal you want to reproduce. We talked about the reports you made in school, all those things. How do you use English in your life? What do you listen to, and so on? Try to get your student to make something close to that, something that's reachable for them. Okay, so the resulting product would be something encountered in daily life or from a profession. This is a real use of language. We talked about how important it is to build a language machine in your mind that actually is used. If you memorize vocabulary and phrases, you still haven't actually recalled them in a conversation. So this kind of project-based system is asking the student to use their language to make something which might actually be useful. And like we said in the classroom, if they have to communicate with their classmates in English, that's another layer of language instruction. Okay? And we can build a lesson or a series of lessons to get there. That's stacking the ladders. So one element of the project could be one lesson, the next element, and so on. Just repeat the cycle until you get to your goal. So let me look at the next slide. I want to stop before we talk about this. Any questions so far? Okay. So why use projects inside the classroom? It's a little bit of repetition. So communication and cooperation are required to achieve a goal. If you can practice that and learn English at the same time, it's pretty profitable, in my opinion. So students must coordinate in English in order to produce and present a result in English. Again, it's like a real job skill. So it's a bang for your buck activity. You're training multiple skills in a practical way. So this is the model of the slide that you'll see, I think, 6 times. This is the project cycle. It has 3 stages, like we said. Each one is about 20 minutes, so basically equates to a 60-minute lesson. So when you begin the lesson, you begin the class, this one particularly applies to classrooms. You start by describing what the task is going to be. They must understand it, so you have to be very clear about your instructions. And they go through the first stage of building it, which is where they communicate and they collaborate. And the teacher's role, after they've made a clear assignment, is really just to guide and be a resource. So if the student has any questions, basically you are a living, breathing dictionary about how grammar is, what word would work well here, is this correct? So you should encourage them to ask you the questions. And when they finish, the students will present the results briefly. This is what we did, this is how it looks, very beautiful, so on. Then comes the substantial part of the teacher's role. We're on the second stage, it's called correction and input. So the teacher, when they were a resource, has to observe what mistakes are being made, either in the project itself or in the communication, just hearing what people are saying. And then you can go to the board and talk about those points. It's kind of an improvisation method, which we talked about last time. But you have this stimulus. You hear the mistakes they're making, you see the mistakes in the project, so you can talk about those points before moving on. You don't have to give them the final answer or the full lesson on it, but you can explain why something should be some other thing at this point. Typically, you can also introduce something that's planned at this stage. If you think that your students might not use a certain grammar construction or a tense where it would be useful in the project, then you can present that to them in this correction and input section. That's the input component. So what was the example I had with the brochure? Comparatives. So the comparative construction would compare the 2 vacation destinations. The brochure talked about places you could go on vacation. Then I taught them how to make comparatives and asked them, please, now correct your product by incorporating elements that compare the 2 places. One is cheaper, one is hotter than the other, and so on. So that's how they were able to use this new grammar. Maybe they knew it, but they hadn't used it, perhaps, and they could put it into something they just made. Again, the teacher is a guide and a resource for this 3rd stage, and the students present again. So the whole thing takes about 60 minutes, and on the next slide we'll see why exactly that is a useful model. So again, the teacher has vast knowledge which can be explained when needed. it's kind of hard for us to plan, well, what should I teach my students? Of all the things I know, what's the most important thing now? And what do I know about it? And how can I communicate it in a clear way? That's a lot harder than just being in the classroom and asking them to do something and helping them as the language appears. Because they're basically showing you what they know, or showing you how well they can use what they know. Then you can fix it. I think it was last time. I talked about, it was 2 times ago. I talked about how you're like the gardener and you are grooming the plant to be something beautiful, like a bonsai. So basically your students in the classroom show you what they know, and then you see that piece and correct it. Do you remember how we said that then you learn something very well when it's connected to something you already know, right? So if you can see their language and you can correct it in context, basically you're fixing that point. So what they're doing is using what they know, it's in their brain, and you say, no, it's this way. So the correction and feedback in language learning is very important. If you're not steered in the right direction, you'll grow wild, and it won't be, I'm not saying it's wrong, but just talking about what language is, it's basically something that is shared. So there's a style, there's an American style, there's an English style. So if they learn independently only by reading and they never heard what English sounds like, probably what they will say after 10 years is going to be something like, whoa, where did you learn that? And it's not wrong, like I said, but again, when you are helping your students fit in, that's what correction and feedback can do. So yeah, the teacher has the ability to hear, correct, see mistakes, and you probably should come with a plan to integrate useful language into the lesson. You could fill up all your time in that middle stage, just correcting the mistakes you hear. But I think if there's not enough, you're going to look like you don't know what you're doing, and you should have something to help them. So if you come prepared with that comparatives, construction, for example, you can say, now that you know, please fix your brochure, please fix your project. Okay, so it's more spontaneous and less work for the teacher. Let me unmute Tom. Any questions at this point? This is all clear? So let's look at it one more time. So this is repeating what we just said. The students attach new knowledge to something recent, structured, and tangible. So they invest time in making this project. When you make something, you feel attachment in a way, like, look at this beautiful thing I made. Great. That kind of makes it stronger in the brain. You will remember, if you can recall the project, the poster you made, it's like, it was like this. That gives you the ability to integrate new language, not just into the brain, but on the project. If you can change the project, they can remember the changes you made on the project, and that will help them remember what happened a little better. Again, they practice presentation in English, which is very useful as a job skill. They can understand their mistakes and have a tangible project to correct and improve. And finally, they immediately integrate that new language and revise their product. Okay? So, questions on the project cycle? unmute Tom. What do you think are the advantages of the project cycle?
Well, I think for one thing, I mean, you mentioned if you organize something, construct it, and present it, and you do it all in English, then it's giving them, you know, I mean, obviously they're seeing all tenets of, they're incorporating into all aspects of you know, I don't know, doing something. And another quick thing that was interesting is it's an observation that I just made, that I've been making a long time, is that if you give people ownership of something, then they not only pride, but it's, I think that at least in my life, anything that I owned, be it a project or report or anything like that, I'm more likely to listen to correction and to work harder on it because it's mine. And I think that's important to people.
I agree. Any other advantages?
Well, it's useful in their day-to-day, if it's something that they can use.
So you can take from what they need, so what they do at their place of work or what they do in their daily life, and design a project that helps them reach that level where they have no problem with it. Anything else? What are the disadvantages?
Amount of time.
So yes, Britt made a good point about time control. So I guess there is an element of understanding how long it will take, and making sure that you can get through those 3 stages without running over. Now, when I meet with my students in person, usually it's for 90 minutes. 2 hours seems a little too long for me. 1 hour seems like not long enough, so 90 minutes. In that case, we could do 30 minutes for each stage, which gives a little more flexibility. Okay, so yes, time controls is one disadvantage. I have one other in mind. Does anyone else have an idea? This one is about what people like to do. Some people don't like to be given an open-ended task and then try to make something with it. So that's a disadvantage, that this does ask people to kind of get together and visualize how they can make something, which could be difficult in a new language, and then finish the project in a time limit. So it could put some pressure on your students. So be careful about what you're asking them to do. Make sure it's not out of reach, and consider who you put into groups if you're doing a class. But we'll look at this specifically for individual lessons. So that's right here. So I like to use writing projects for individual students. The 2 main reasons you'll see: one, it's very efficient. That's because it's a productive skill, just like speaking. So listening and reading, basically you are receiving English constantly. I'm not saying it's not useful. In fact, it's probably great to receive information, but as far as actually being able to use it, speaking and writing are the real practical uses. It requires the big picture perspective. So when you make a cohesive piece of writing, you have to understand, what am I trying to say and when am I finished? And is it in a clear order that someone else can understand? So it trains more communication skills. You can visually check grammar and construction. For me personally, it's very hard when I'm having a tutor teach me a language to remember what they said. I have to see it. So it's just easier for me to see the spelling of the word, because even when they say it and I can repeat it, it just kind of like goes in one ear and out the other. So having the writing and correcting it, I think, leaves a stronger memory impression for a lot of people. Maybe not everyone, but it's an advantage. Okay, so how do you think you should go about studying all English vocabulary? It's probably like 60,000 words. How would you go about studying that? Just kind of dive in there, hope
Oh,
to survive,
no.
go for the most advanced book and say, hey, I don't even need to learn this. This is like fantasy.
In the context of each word, I guess, maybe put, each word
Like that?
used in a sentence. That's the way I remember them, I know. Understand the meaning.
I think context is part of the puzzle.
Mhm.
So what I mean is, you have your own vocabulary. It's relevant to your life. Like, what do I do in my daily life? What did I do today? If you can say all the words that apply to what you did today, that's your vocabulary. What you did at work, that's your vocabulary. If you're a doctor, you have a completely different vocabulary from the lawyer and the mayor and so on. They all have something that's relevant to their own lives, what their children are doing, and so on. So these writing topics, if you can make it personal, like a journal entry, what did you do today? Don't underestimate that. What did you do today? If they can talk about that, that's beautiful. So you build your own personal inventory of vocabulary with writing. Okay, and again, the native speaker can sculpt the language into something natural and aesthetic. Again, that's just taste. Natural, what do I mean? I mean, I don't know why we talk like this in America now. I think 200 years ago, it probably didn't sound like this. Just natural process. So how is it? You help them. When you're talking, we say it this way.
Mhm.
What you said is logical, but we choose this phrase. Okay, and the second reason why it's pretty great, when you can do it, not just to assign it at the beginning of the lesson, but also this allows some kind of continuity between lessons. If you assign it in, say like next week, I want you to bring a journal entry about what you did, that's what we'll review in the next lesson. So it has that flexibility where you can assign it at the beginning of the lesson and keep it contained in your meeting, or you can have it span across your meetings and it gives you something to work on while you're there. Okay, so again, it looks just like this. First draft, then correction input, then revised draft. So looking at the main points, it says student chooses a subject or goal, something relevant to their lives, build a personal vocabulary. Student writes in or outside the lesson. And again, the teacher is a guide or a resource. Now, if they're doing it outside the lesson, you can email, text, however you want. And if they have questions about how to do something. Okay? Then when you meet, that's your correction and input time. So the student brings the draft and you basically go through it and talk about all the things that you encounter, a better word choice, missing article, and just go through it until you finish. That takes a while, if you can believe it. So that can take 2 60-minute meetings to correct one essay, because there's so much to talk about when someone writes, especially when, not just if it's a American student at an American high school trying to write a better essay. If you're coming from a different country trying to use a new language, there's even more. So it takes a lot of time to go over everything. You don't have to, but just to really squeeze all of the valuable learning opportunities out of one essay. Okay? And so, based on what they learned from your corrections, ask them to revise the essay. Revise whatever it is, the email. And the cycle repeats until it's perfect and they write beautifully. Okay, so let's do a final brainstorm. What topics can your students write about?
I guess things from their everyday life.
Yes, it's a little general. Could you be a little more specific?
Well, I guess what their profession is, what they do at work, if they have a job, but you'd have to determine that, or
What they like to do?
yeah, their fun activities, their hobbies. Yeah.
Very nice.
For instance, I have an acquaintance who's having a huge birthday party. It's, I guess, I think they call it Quince Año in Mexico, where it's a huge event for young ladies. And
Quinceañera.
so maybe it was like a quinceañera. I'm sorry. It's just something like that, like a family event, something that that is personal, maybe even cultural to them, but that they can then do in English.
That's a great idea. So it ties in the culture with the life event. The hobby gave me a similar idea because you can tell the full story about how you started this. Well, actually, I started when I was 5 years old, and I was doing this, and that's how I found it.
Mm-hmm.
I know one student, she does kendo, and I always ask, how did you start that and become a master? And she said, well, I was just walking my dog past the dojo, and then, now I'm a master.
What is that?
Kendo. It's a
Kendo?
Japanese sword martial art. So they use the wooden sword.
Oh.
Probably they don't do this. I think they have like a very strict up and down kind of thing. Right? What would they be most interested in writing about?
Well, if they're like most people themselves.
It's true.
It's what they know the best.
Or the family.
Excellent points. I just asked this from a different angle. So yes, what topics can they write about? What would they be interested in writing about? Keep that in mind. Okay. Oh, and this, I actually used this previously, this presentation. So the last point is normally we have a multicultural celebration at the Literacy Center where the students present their essays that they write. So keep that in mind. We don't know when we'll have the multicultural celebration again because we can't gather like we used to. But if you can work with your student to really polish their writing skills, they can show off and have their essay collected in our publication and look really nice. So
yeah, there was one in the email last week from the center. It was really good.
Yeah.
I think it was a Korean woman, maybe, talking about getting her driver's license and taking the test. It was really good.
Awesome. So yeah, keep that in mind, and you can show off with your student. So, any questions? All right, we're at the final lap. Let's do our review. Are you ready? Question 1. What are the 2 lesson models you have learned during training?
Progressive? Isn't that what it's called? Progressive is one called?
The title's not so important, but I think you're on, that's correct. So what do you mean the progressive model?
You're asking details. It's, I don't know. You know, it's, you know, you warm up, give them a little, and then test them out with what you've been feeding them.
Yes. We call that the unit lesson model. I called it that just because I wanted to emphasize the ladder progression. So you
Okay.
go like progress in the lesson. So yeah, the progressive model might be a better title. But yeah, so it's basically the unit that you stack on each other, increasing the intensity as you go up. Very nice. So what was the other model you learned?
I answered that one. I got to answer the other one.
I gotta call on Britt.
I don't know what to say.
Tom, it's not a trick question.
Oh,
I'm looking at my notes, and the very first page I turn to is the 7 stages of the unit lesson model, of course, the one we
Good.
just answered.
We got the, that one's pretty great.
Oh, the audio, not the audiolingual, right?
Oh,
the project cycle, the one that we just learned.
it's the project cycle. Great. Now the audiolingual method, definitely remember that. It's a tool
Gotcha.
for teaching. It's a method, but not a lesson model.
Gotcha.
Okay, so great. How long should it take to complete a project in a classroom setting, and why?
15 to 25 minutes.
Exactly. Why?
Well, because if you have an hour, then it would be there are 3 20-minute segments, and that's as long as it would be.
Exactly right. Question 3. What is the project cycle in a classroom setting? So what are those 3 segments, basically?
This is not the writing one. It's the
Project.
The one that we were just looking at, which it was like revise, but you practice, give correction, and then revise.
that's
Yes.
not the first draft, correction and input and revised, or I don't know.
Yes, the only thing I changed when going from the one for the class to the one for the individual student was I changed the word first product to first draft, because normally we say draft for essays.
Yeah.
So same thing, it's first product, and then correction and input, and then finally revised product. Okay, question 4. What is the teacher's role in the project cycle? So what would you be doing at those 3 stages?
Giving input.
That's 1. What stage does that take place?
The second one, the correction.
Yes. So
Guidance.
So guide and assign the task. That would be the first thing.
yeah, definitely give clear instructions. And then you are offering guidance, and you're the resource from which they can ask, how do you say this, and so on. Any other role for the teacher? Don't forget to observe. So that's part of your correction and input. When you can see what the student presents, but also when they are collaborating, try to hear how everything's going. And you can correct at that time, or you can notice a pattern and address it in the middle section. Okay. Question 5. What is the first stage of the writing cycle for an individual student?
You mean like when you were asking about what can they write versus what they're interested in?
That's, yes. So yeah, there was the first draft, but in order to do that, just like we provided clear instructions for the class, in this case, we choose a goal. So what can they write about? Okay, that's exactly right. What does the teacher do at that stage?
Reviews.
Do what?
Reviews, provides assistance, input.
Basically, yeah, just provide assistance. You're the resource in the first stage. You might not be working with your student face to face at that time, but they can always ask you questions. Text, for example, if you're comfortable with texting. I never had a problem with it with my students. Okay, question 6. What is the second stage of the writing cycle for an individual student?
Would that be the first draft? Or no?
Not quite.
Oh.
What they are interested in.
Let me go back to the slide, just because I don't want to have it be too confusing. So this is what it looks like. When I say stage, I mean these 3 blocks. But you can see that there's bullet points for the blocks.
Okay.
Okay, so I guess I won't allow you to cheat. What is the second stage of the writing cycle?
The student presents the project, gives you the project, the first draft of it.
That's the first draft stage. The second, so there's the 3. There's first draft, and then there's something, and there's revised draft. So what's that second stage?
Correction and input?
Yes, correction and input. So yes, it does involve the first draft. But you're at that stage where it's basically complete, and now you've moved on to this role of just correcting that complete stage. Then you let them go again, and they correct, they revise their essays without you being so involved as a consultant. Is that clear?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah, if I make anything unclear, I apologize. It's part of my responsibility to make sure the words are chosen correctly and everything's given a good title. All right, so question 7. What is the third stage of the writing cycle for an individual student?
Can you go back to the other slide?
Doing the revised draft.
Yes.
Yeah.
So yes, it's just the revised draft. Again, so the way we organize these 3 stages is the student produces it, and the teacher is not so involved unless the student asks for help. Then, after it's finished, the student brings it to you and asks, please, what learning opportunities are here in this? And then you can look at it and correct it and talk about all the things that could be changed or improved. I say changed because sometimes I say, you actually have a different way to say this. So we have thesauruses for us, and it shows the words we could use basically in the same place. It's a more advanced option. Okay, once you've squeezed out all the learning opportunities, you give it back to them. Say, so now that you know, please bring it back to me again, even better. That's the revised draft. Okay, last question. What is the assignment to be completed before the final lesson?
Have an article read with your student?
Okay, the 1 video lesson should be pretty easy. Those things take about maybe 15-30 minutes. Tom is extra. Tom has to do some troubleshooting with me.
Yes.
Okay, so it was 1.
And read the last piece.
The last section of the
Perfect.
training.
There's 1 more.
That rough sketch of a full lesson is not the fifth class. Oh no, that is our. Oh, we also have to do that for next week also. Oh.
That's right. So bring the rough sketch. Now, Ruth, your slides, that would count. So if you did something like that, that's basically a full lesson. Like I said, you don't have to do the task cycle.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to do the unit lesson model or the progressive model, if we want to call it that.
Mm-hmm.
You can do whatever you want. So that was good.
Okay.
All right. And with that, we are 80% done. Isn't that great? I should say we're 80% of the way to the start of something new.
Mm-hmm.
So, thanks, guys. And we have 1 more. I'll see you next week.
All right.
Okay.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Thank you.
Yes, of course.
Talk
Take
soon,
care.
Tyler.